On debate, Senator No.
Thank you, Mr. Speakers. Honorable colleagues, I rise today on a matter of great importance, my motion for the Government of Canada to call upon 6 or more of the current parties to the Act of the International Conference on Vietnam to agree to reconvene the International Conference on Vietnam. In an effort to end the Vietnam War and come to the lasting resolution, the agreement of ending the war and restoring peace in Vietnam and its protocol, commonly known as the Paris Peace Accord or Paris Agreement, were signed by the U.S., the Republic of Vietnam called South Vietnam, the Democratic Republic of Vietnam called North Vietnam, and the Provisional Revolutionary Government of the Republic of Vietnam called Viet Cong in Paris on January 27, 1973. Some of the key provisions of the Paris Peace Accord called for a ceasefire throughout Vietnam, ban on introduction of war material and military troops into South Vietnam, and creation of the International Commission of Control and Supervision called ICCS to monitor the implementation of the specific provision of the Paris Peace Accord. According to Article 19 of the Paris Agreement, from February 26 to March the 2nd, a second international conference was held again in Paris, which, among other things, established the ICCS rule of conduct and its reporting mechanism to support the agreement's implementation. The conference was concluded on March the 2nd, 1973, by the signing of the Act of the International Conference of Vietnam, called the Act, wherein the parties of the Paris Agreement and 8 other countries, Canada, France, Hungary, Indonesia, Poland, UK, Soviet Union, and China, pledged they would henceforth not only to uphold and support its term, but also abide by its provisions, including those related to foreign interference. Both the Paris Agreement and the Act were registered with the United Nations Secretariat on May the 13th, 1974. In addition to many Canadian soldiers that died during the Vietnam War, Canada made significant contributions toward the effort to reach a lasting peace in Vietnam. It was the part of the first International Commission for Supervision and Control in Vietnam, established by the 1954 Geneva Accord. It was part of the second International Commission for the Control and Supervision, the ICCS, established by the Paris Peace Accord, sending peacekeeping force in 1973 to investigate compliance and uphold its provision, and more importantly, is a signatory to the Act of the International Conference on Vietnam. As one of the signatories of the Act, Canada played an integral supervisory role in the effort to support peace. As part of the ICCS, along with Poland, Hungary, and Indonesia, which were at the time respectively communist countries and a dictatorship, were made key contribution by investigating and overseeing that respect of the ceasefire, withdrawal of troops, and return captured military and civilians personnel were maintained. Unfortunately, Canada's role was rendered difficult as it was the only democratic nation member of the ICCS, the 4 nations that had to unanimously agree to investigate the violations. During Canada's time as the member, at least 18,000 ceasefire violations were reported. During the same time, only 1,081 complaints were investigated by the ICCS. Despite the subsequent invasion of South Vietnam by North Vietnamese Communist force in 1975, in absolute violation of the Paris Peace Accord and of the Act, I believe they remain a valuable diplomatic tool for the resolution of dispute between signatory parties that arise from violation of the term. I wish to draw your attention to Articles 7A and 7B of the Act, which provide a useful mechanism for dispute settlement in the event of the Paris Peace Accord are infringed upon. Article 7A allows the party to determine necessary remedial measures in the event of violation of the Paris Peace Accord, which threaten the peace, the independence, sovereignty, unity, or the territorial integrity of Vietnam, or the right of the South Vietnamese people to self-determination. Article 7B provides for the International Conference on Vietnam be reconvened upon joint request by the government of the United States of America and the government of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam on behalf of the party signatories to the agreement, or upon requests by 6 or more of the parties to this act. Canada has vested interest in continuing to uphold stability, peace, and democracy in Asia. To this end, it is incumbent upon Canada's government to call upon 6 or more of the current parties to the Act to agree to reconvene the International Conference on Vietnam. There are compelling arguments that indicate there are sufficient ground to engage Article 7B of the Act and thereby reconvene the said conference. On April 23, 2015, Journey to Freedom Day Act was adopted. The first 2 elements of the preamble acknowledged the involvement of Kenyan forces by assisting the enforcement of Paris Peace Accord and the subsequent invasion of South Vietnam by military force of the People's Armies of Vietnam and the National Liberation Front in 1975. Considering these first 2 elements of the said preamble, the Parliament of Canada unequivocally recognized violation of the agreement on ending the war and restoring peace in Vietnam and its protocol, and the Act of the International Conference on Vietnam. Not only are there no provision within the Paris Agreement allow the party to terminate it, but also the Vienna Convention of the Law of Treaties that provides the mechanism for state to either withdraw, terminate, or suspend treaties is inapplicable in this case, as it came into force after the Paris Agreement was reached. Article 4 of the Vienna Convention regarding its non-reactivity make it possible to invoke it. Furthermore, the United States has never ratified it. Additionally, when the United States and Vietnam decide to establish diplomatic relations after the fall of Saigon and the reunification of South and North Vietnam, public statements referring to the Paris Accord were made by their respective officials, thus suggesting it could be considered as still in force, at least in part. As in the case with the Paris Peace Accord, the Act is bereft of provision which allow for its termination or sunset clauses for its application. Also, since the Vienna Convention of the Law of Treaties come into effect after the Act, the Convention is also inapplicable to the Act. Contrary to the Paris Peace Accord, where customary international law make it difficult to give a clear-cut and conclusive answer because of the ambiguity regarding its status, in this particular case, one must look to customary international law to interpret the Act. Such an interpretation would imply that the Act continues to be enforced, as it specifically provides a mechanism for the international conference to be reconvened without the U.S. and Vietnam jointly requesting it. Therefore, the Act continues to be binding on the other 8 signatory countries. Furthermore, the Act is listed among multi-party treaties and agreements by the U.S. Department of State are still in force as of January 1st, 2020, with Canada still listed as one of the parties. For the purpose of reconvening the international conference in accordance with Article 7B, in fine, Canada, France, Hungary, Indonesia, Poland, UK, US, Russia, and China, most of which are democratic countries, including Hungary, Indonesia, and Poland, which were not at that time, should be considered as being the current party to the Act. For the reconvention of the international conference to take place, at least 6 of them should agree to it. Alternatively, and pursuant to Article 7B, in limine, the reconvention of the conference could also happen if the U.S. and Vietnam jointly requested it, provided that Vietnam clearly states its intention in continuing North Vietnam participation in the Act. Ultimately, if there is a consensus among the parties that the Paris Agreement continues to be enforced, it can be reopened and renegotiated. The same applies to the Act. In its case, it would allow for the international conference to be reconvened in accordance to the Article 7B. Furthermore, during a luncheon at the Nixon Center in Washington on April 24, 1998, entitled Vietnam, the Paris Agreement and Their Meaning for Today, former U.S. Secretary of State Dr. Henry Kissinger said, and I quote, "Because an agreement that you don't enforce is a surrender. It's just writing down surrender term, and that we never intended. Every senior members of the administration, including myself, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, is represented in compendium of statements that say publicly every other week that we intended to enforce the agreement. There was nothing new about that. Moreover, reconvening this international conference can also be a valuable mechanism to initiate negotiation some of the most pressing geopolitical issues in Asia today, such as the South China Sea dispute. Article 4 and 5 of the Act indicate that its signatories, including China, and I quote, solemnly recognize and strictly respect the fundamental national rights of the Vietnamese people, independence, sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Vietnam, as well as the right to the South Vietnamese people to self-determination. The parties to this act shall strictly respect the agreement and the protocol by refraining from any action at variance with their provision. In 1974 and 1988, China invaded Vietnam's Paracel Island and Spratly Island, respectively. These invasions are a violation of the Act, allowing any signatory country to reconvene the international conference as per the conditions set out on Article 7B of the Act. On December 30th, 1974, President Ford signed a Public Law 93-559, Section 34B4, which requires United States executive branch to reconvene the international conference in the eventually of any violation of the Paris Peace Accord. By the intermediary of Article 7 of the Act, and by invoking the spirit of Public Law 93-559, the U.S. has legal ground to initiate the reconvention of the international conference and to force signatories governments to a conference table where China has no veto power and where it can be held accountable for each unlawful invasion and disruption stability in South China Sea. Additionally, on April 24, 2018, we passed a motion in this chamber calling up the government of Canada to take a leading role in urging all involved parties in South China Sea dispute to promote peace by supporting international law and its regional partners and allies, as well as by taking additional steps necessary to de-escalate tension and restore the peace and stability in the region. More recently, during an appearance of the House of Commons Special Committee on Canada-China relations this April, Minister Sajjan said, and I quote, "Canada opposes land reclamation projects and building outposts in dispute area for military purposes. We support lawful commerce, freedom of navigation, and freedom of overflight in accordance with international law. We will continue supporting our allies and partner in the Asia-Pacific region, especially in the face of unilateral action that undermine peace and stability." The minister delivered a similar speech during the 12th annual conference on the South China Sea held in Vietnam on November 2020. It is worth mentioning that Canada is also actively maintaining a naval presence in that region. Colleague, for all these reasons, it is therefore of the utmost importance to reopen this important conference and give serious consideration to reconvening the historic multilateral forum that is the International Conference on Vietnam. I truly believe this would be a vital policy tool and a useful means for the diplomatic and the peaceful resolution of conflicts in Asia. Thank you.